Hey, I'm doing a live stream. I'm continuing with this book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, Pete Walker. And I'm going to read what I was reading yesterday about the inner critic. And I'm going to continue with page, I will say actually, what I've got here that I'm going to put, and there's something called perfectionism attacks, and it's 14 ways of dealing with the inner critic. So I'm definitely going to make sure that I have that below the video when I've finished recording. And I'm also, if anybody wants to email me for the list, they can do that also. But I'll put Pete Walker's webpage so that you're able to see and access that. And hopefully, if anybody has any questions, then we'll be able to, whoops, okay, I'm here. Good, I can see myself. Right, so what I'm going to do is make sure that I basically put the list below. And if anybody joins in for the chat, then please let me know, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But this book saved me a lot of grief. It made me understand what I was going through and understand flashbacks and trauma and my inner critic. So I started on page, this is chapter 9 of this book, and yesterday I started on page, chapter 9 is 167 of this book, and now I'm going to go to page 172 and read from here. So what we have is that the critic attacks, like most things, are not all or none. They can vary in intensity and duration, and most of the case examples that follow are on the intense end of the spectrum. I chose them because they are more illustrative of how the critic operates. Once you become proficient at identifying the intense critic attacks, you typically develop the mindfulness necessary to notice more subtle attacks. This is essential because most survivors spend tremendous amounts of time barely conscious of how incessantly self-critical they are. So the whole point of getting over flashbacks is that one of the things that takes us into flashbacks is that we become critical of ourselves and our thoughts and maybe what other people think about us. And when we do that, that pushes us into having flashbacks. So one thing we can do is that we can have this list, go through it, and then understand that we have some control over our flashbacks when we stop the inner critic in its tracks. We're not always going to be able to do it. It's not all or nothing, but the more aware we become, the easier things get. So I'm going to continue. He says here, as with the flashback management steps, memorizing these rebuttals to the critic and using them like a mantra is especially helpful in critic shrinking. So the whole point is we want to shrink our inner critic, and we can flip. For instance, what we could do is flip a thought. So if you think, I'm really stupid, you can say, I'm really smart. So we can do that throughout the day. We can watch ourselves and watch our thoughts. And as the more mindful we become, the easier this is going to get. So I'm going to continue reading. And the critic-initiated flashbacks. So the inner critic commonly increases the intensity of a flashback via a barrage of the attacks listed above. And those lists I'm going to leave below the video, okay? Flashbacks can devolve into an increasingly painful levels of the abandonment depression. One attack can repetitively bleed into another and tumble us further down a spiral of hopelessness. It is awful enough to take a single punch in a fight, but when the punches keep coming, the victim is severely thrashed. Once again, CPTSD flashbacks do not typically have a visual component. However, it is not unusual for a survivor to sometimes flash on to a snapshot of a parent's contemptuous face at the moment of the triggering. My client Dimitri, he explains here, my client Dimitri began his session by telling me that he was contently puttering around his kitchen when he accidentally knocked over a glass of water. He immediately pictured his father, and a loud internal voice blurted, "I'm such a world-class spaz." Respectively, he realized that he then plummeted instantly into a flashback. Anxiety quickly overwhelmed him, and he was soon lost in a tirade of self-attacking words emanating from the critic. So whatever he called himself, it was a combination of a critic attack, and this combination of critic attacks basically pushes into a hole and make things worse for us. So we've got next, the attacks soon deteriorated into a full-scale laundry listing of all of his imperfections. These were characteristically blown out of proportion and often not reality-based. The critic screamed, "I'm so clumsy, I never do anything right. It's all or none thinking. I could really mess up here," so he's basically talking to himself, like really putting himself down. So you might have found yourself doing that if you get something wrong, and then you begin to really talk to yourself in a really mean, vicious way. And that's what we've got to stop doing. So quickly, Dimitri's thinking was totally dominated by a negative focus that merged with drasticizing and culminated in attack fantasies that made him cancel his plans to go out. So the inner critic actually can run our lives if we don't put a stop to it. And it's quite important that we begin to understand what we're doing. So he says here that this example is a micro portion of the unending onslaught that can accompany a major flashback. After enduring many, many more elaborations of this process, Dimitri became entrenched in the ultimate abandonment, catastrophization. No wonder I don't have a partner or any friends who would tolerate being around me. I'm such a loser. He actually had 2 good friends. So there you go. Dimitri felt sense of abandonment, then morphed into self-abandonment. Primitive self-soothing behaviors re-emerged as he self-medicated by binging on an enormous amount of junk food. He often then retreated back into his own bedroom to disassociate further into a long morning nap. All this in reaction to the teeny accident of the spilled glass of water. And of course, we all do things like that. So giving ourselves a hard time is a really, weird thing to do. We really need to be mindful how we speak to ourselves. So then it goes on to say that all this was a revisit by a flashback to the real traumatic experiences of being profoundly rejected by his parents for trivial mistakes. His father had contemptuously told him he could mess up a free lunch innumerable times. As Dimitri resolved and harvested the learning potential of the flashback, he said to me, "Pete, I can't tell you how horrible they were. Life at home was a no-win situation. It was a really messed up situation, one after the other. Everything I did or didn't do was looked at. It's no wonder I've been stuck all these years with all this ball and chain code. Don't ever let down your guard." That's how he was thinking in his mind. "Something's just moved in me, and I swear I'm going to start cutting myself some slack." So the important thing is that we cut ourselves some slack by getting rid of the inner critic. And there are ways of doing this, and I'm going to show you now. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you the list of the 14 inner critic. The list. That's what I'm going to do. So here goes. There you go. Right. So what you've got here, and this is from Pete Walker's book, and this is the list of 14 common inner critic attacks divided into key categories of perfectionism and endangerment, and each is paired with a healthier and typically more accurate thought substitution response. So this is what we have to learn to do. This is our inner work in order to overcome the inner critic, so that we stop. When we have a flashback, we're not going to push ourselves in further. We'll be able to catch ourselves quicker, and then we're not going to go into panic attacks and such like when we understand this inner critic. So here we've got the first one. I'm just going to get my pointer as well. Whoops, going back there, back to the beginning. And hang on a second, my pointer is is here. So, spotlight. So this is number one, okay? So perfectionism. My perfectionism arose as an attempt to gain safety and support in my dangerous family. Perfection is a self-persecutory myth. I do not have to be perfect to be safe or loved in the present. I am letting go of relationships that require perfection. I have a right to make mistakes, and mistakes do not make me a mistake. Every mistake or mishap is an opportunity to practice loving myself in the places I have never been loved. Okay, so number two, all or none, black and white thinking. I reject extreme or overgeneralized descriptions, judgments, or criticisms. One negative happenstance does not mean I'm stuck in a never-ending pattern of defeat. Statements that describe me as always or never, this or that, are typically grossly inaccurate. So let me stop there. So I've had people say to me, in my past, say to me, you always do that. Or, and I find that quite a negative thing to say to another human being. And that's something we need to stop saying to ourselves. There's not an always in most situations, where we're moving through life, we're human beings and we don't always do something. So, and if people say things like that to you, you always do that, or, pick them up on it, say, hey, no, we've got to learn to stand up for ourselves as well and have a healthy self-regard and not let people belittle us or tell us, there's something wrong with us. And the next slide is, okay, 3. We've got self-hate, self-disgust, and toxic shame. So I commit to myself. I am on my side. I am a good enough person, and I refuse to trash myself. I turn shame back into blame and disgust and externalize it to anyone who shames my normal feelings and foibles. As long as I'm not hurting anyone else, I refuse to be shamed for normal, healthy emotional responses like anger, sadness, fear, and depression. I especially refuse to attack myself for how hard it is to completely eliminate the self-hate habit. So what we're doing is we're basically getting to a point where we're beginning to be mindful and watch what we think and how we think, so that we helping ourselves. And, this is really, really important. I'm quite good at this now. I still do it. I still sometimes, I have the inner critic, but I'm a lot quicker to put a stop to it and become aware. I'm aware of it now. So number 4, micromanagement, worrying, obsessing, and looping. So over futurizing, I will not repetitively examine details over and over. I will not jump to negative conclusions, and I will not endlessly second guess myself. I cannot change the past. I forgive all of my past mistakes. I cannot make the future perfectly safe. I will stop hunting for what could go wrong, and I will not try to control the uncontrollable. I will not micromanage myself or others, and I work in a way that is good enough, and I accept the essential fact that my efforts sometimes bring desired results and sometimes they do not. And he says here, and it's a prayer which I've heard before, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's a serenity prayer for anybody that wants to look that up on Google if you think you might like the look of that. So next slide. 5. So here we have unfair, devaluing comparisons to others or to one's most perfect moments. I refuse to compare myself unfavorably to others. I will not compare my insides to their outsides, and I will not judge myself for not being at peak performance all of the time in a society that pressures us into acting happy all of the time. I will not get down on myself for feeling bad. So this is really important that we know this too. This is a really good list that Pete Walker came up with, in my opinion. So, and others as well. I'm not alone in thinking that. So number 6 is guilt feeling. Guilty does not mean I am guilty. Feeling guilty does not mean I am guilty. I refuse to make my decisions and choices from guilt. Sometimes I need to feel the guilt and do it anyway. In the inevitable instance, when I inadvertently hurt someone, I will apologize and make amends and let go of my guilt. I will not apologize over and over. I am no longer a victim. I will not accept unfair blame, and guilt is sometimes camouflaged as fear. I'm afraid, but I am not guilty or in danger. Okay. Next slide. 7, we have shoulding. I will substitute the words want to for should and only follow the imperative if it feels like I want to, unless I am under legal and ethical or moral obligation. And then we have number 8, overproductivity, workaholism, busyholism. I am a human being, not a human doing. I will not choose to be perpetually productive. I am more productive in the long run when I balance work with play and relaxation, and I will not try to perform at 100% all of the time. I subscribe to the normalcy of facilitating along the continuum of efficiency. So it's good to be efficient, and it's good to, have things organized in our lives, but some days we're not going to be on top of the game. We're human beings. So number 9, harsh judgments of self and others, name calling. I will not let the bullies and critics of my early life win by joining and agreeing with them. I refuse to attack myself or abuse others, and I will not displace the criticism and blame that rightfully belongs to them onto myself or current people in my life. I care for myself. The more solitary, the more friendliness, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. And that was Jane Eyre. I believe that's the way that's pronounced. And then we have endangerment attacks. Okay, so number 10, drasticizing, catastrophizing, and hypochondricizing. I feel afraid, but I am not in danger. I am not in trouble with my parents, and I will not blow things out of proportion. I refuse to scare myself with thoughts and pictures of my life deteriorating. No more horrible homemade horror movies and disaster flicks. Number 11, negative focus. I renounce over noticing and dwelling on what might be wrong with me or life around me. I will not minimize or discount my attributes. Right now, I notice, visualize, and enumerate my accomplishments, talents, and qualities, as well as the many gifts life offers me. Example, friends, nature, music, film, food, beauty, color, and pets. There's so many good things, so that we can look at. Number 12, time urgency. I am not in danger. I do not need to rush. I will not hurry unless it is a true emergency. And I am learning to enjoy doing my daily activities at a relaxed pace. So something I noticed about myself, the more I worked on this, where I would rush from one thing to the other, now I'm more relaxed. I give myself more time to do what I want, and I enjoy the time that I spend, like taking my time. There's no rush. Everything happens as it should, and it's good to work on what's in front of us. So number 13 is disabling performance anxiety. So I reduce procrastination by reminding myself that I will not accept unfair criticism or perfectionist expectations from anyone, even when I'm afraid. And I will defend myself from unfair criticism, and I won't let fear make my decisions. And then finally, number 14, perseverating about being attacked unless there are clear signs of danger. I will thought stop my projection of past bully critics onto others. The vast majority of my fellow human beings are peaceful people. I have legal authorities to aid in my protection if threatened by the few who aren't. And I invoke thoughts and images of my friends, love and support. So this is Pete Walker, MA. It's in the book, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. And the Shrinking Inner Critic, this page I'm going to put below the video so you're able to look at that. Okay, I'm going to stop share. So here I am. So the beauty is, the whole point of this little video, because I'm doing 30 days in a row, I'm on day 3, is we've been looking at the inner critic, and the whole point is to get to a place where we're mindful that we do have an inner critic. Everybody has one, but there are varying degrees of it. Some people, you know, I would assume there probably are some people in the world that don't have an inner critic at all, but it's healthy to have an inner critic in many ways, because when we have an inner critic, then we can, you know, guide ourselves through life. But when our inner critic is over the top and berating us and telling us that we're really bad people, and we're not, you know, it's not the way to live, and it's not good for us, and it knocks our own self-esteem. So there you go. That's it for today. And I hope it's been helpful and of value to somebody out there. And I'll be on tomorrow with video 4 of my doing my own mental health awareness month, along with the USA. They're doing it. So apparently that's what I saw on the news. And in London, it's for a week in the middle of May. Okay, so thanks for watching, and let me know if you've got any questions. Subscribe, hit the notification button if you want to come on and see my lives. You'll get notified. Thank you.